Hello and welcome to episode 81 of the Middle-Aged Outlaws podcast. Today we continue on with our wrestling documentary Spotlight as we discuss a couple of redemption stories. Two of wrestling's most unlikely men, Adam. Two former WCW stars. One, a Canadian-born Mexican star who toured for a year with Milli Vanilli. The other, a Hollywood actor and star of such classics as Ready to Rumble, Eight-Legged Freaks, Muppets from Space, Airheads, actual classic, and more importantly, a former WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Nice. Anyway, before we get into our documentaries, Adam, where is your beard?
Yeah, so I felt like a bit more capable of trying to do something about it, and you know, there's all these like meetings at work, and I was starting to feel like I was looking a bit like a hobo, and nobody was taking me seriously. I should never have bowed to the pressure. I apologise.
That's appropriate. It's still there, but just not. The magnificence and glory is gone.
Yeah.
The good news is it can come back.
It was like Thespian from the 70s or something like that, you know. Yeah.
I expect you to have like turned up in the what is the song I'm thinking of? Don't Fear the Reaper.
Oh.
Expect you like if your beard had a theme song, I think that is what it would be.
Yeah. Should have feared the Clipper.
That was good. Okay, let's start off with our first. Should we have you watched Clash at the Castle? Anything at all? Should we not address it?
I didn't watch it. I thought about watching it, and then I ended up watching too much football. To be honest, so yeah, I'm not saying I'm back in fully with WWE, but I'm kind of in a mindset where I'm definitely considering watching when they put a show out. So that's progress.
And we will definitely not discuss Scotland, Germany. And hope that by the time this comes out and then we next record, that we'll have beaten Switzerland and pumped Hungary. Hungary.
If we're going to hump anyone, you may have to make up countries because, you know, we're clearly going to have to play quite a lot better than Friday.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get into... So our first documentary we're going to talk about today is from 2019. It's called Nail in the Coffin, The Fall and Rise of Vampiro. And it was all set around Ian Hodgkinson, as he's known. Vampiro, as he's known to Milli Vanilli. And it was an interesting one, something I'd never seen before. Watched the trailer for it, thought it looked interesting, and reviews that it's had and things like that have been really favourable, so thought it'd be worth watching. Yeah, an interesting one. So let's just sort of talk through it. Basic premise, though, is... Here's the synopsis, actually. Here we go. A rare glimpse into the legendary career of wrestling icon Vampiro as he grapples with his demons and life after fame. Straight from one of wrestling's most outspoken characters, this is a candid look beyond the ring. I'm not sure it does what it says that it does.
Nah, like, I didn't know an awful lot about Vampiro, so I was going into this thinking I'd seen him have like a couple of matches in WCW, and I thought I'm going to get the story of the guy. But yeah, it's quite interesting the way that they decided to tell that story, because it probably wasn't what either of us expected, I don't think.
Nah. I either expected a sort of career, it's similar to the Andre the Giant thing.
Yeah.
A career story of how he came to be. So basically, what we've experienced of Vampiro as part of this podcast was Halloween Havoc 2000, when we fought Mike Awesome and broke his neck.
Yeah.
That's it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the only match I remember us seeing when we were watching for the podcast.
I've encountered him as a commentator on Lucha Underground.
Okay.
But that's it for me.
Yeah, I knew of him, and you'd heard about him. I'd seen him have that match. Horrible finish in that match. And yeah, I think I was really interested in how did he break through? How did he come to be? What was the story of the changing of the character and the development of the character and all that? And there's bits, but it kind of skates past a lot of them pretty quickly, actually.
It does, doesn't it? I feel like there's no main thread to it. There's no real... So we get very, very, very first thing we see is him working as a producer for AAA in Mexico. He clearly, to me, seems very passionate about what he does and what is going on out there.
Yeah.
So we see that aspect of him. We see some interesting backstage stuff from AAA, which we can talk about. So there's that aspect to him. We see the personal aspect to the man who hates people. Is what he said. I fucking hate people. I fucking hate wrestling. I'm dying to get away from it. He's an interesting character. So we see that side to him, and we see him as he is then going to his doctors and stuff like that. We can talk about that as well.
Yeah.
It jumps back and forward. We see some stuff from we don't really see how he started out in wrestling.
No. There's a bit of talk about basically how he found his look as a bit of an outcast. And I think they talk about influence of the Sex Pistols, I think Sid Vicious in particular, and then it yeah, it's odd. I think there was something else talked about his he references Milli Vanilli, which you've touched on as being part of the look, coming to the look as well. But yeah, there's not a lot about getting trained and
No.
I think in fact the mention, there's very little mention of loving it as a kid or anything like that, which you often get in these. In fact, I think the indication was he didn't really have any interest in it until a certain point in life.
He was a hockey prodigy, and he talked about as a man being Canadian. It's understandable, but it seems like he really was genuinely pretty good at ice hockey and expected to become professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he talked about some really deep and affecting things that have happened to him as a young man and not knowing how to deal with it. And clearly a lot of that is impacted on his personality and his relationships with other people throughout his life.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing I was going to say that we see? I suppose we do get a fair bit of his experiences sort of going through the more recognisable parts in North America and working WCW. A lot of that is him complaining about people being out to get him.
Yeah.
People screwing him over. There's quite a lot of talk about his rivalry with Conan.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to tell whether or not this is real heat or it's wrestling.
It's the kind of thing I don't mind hearing about and seeing referenced in this kind of thing, because we're aware of these rivalries and the idea that it maybe became a bit real because they both wanted to be the top guy, and Conan basically was made out to be like this guy who was very happy to help his fellow Mexican wrestlers get a shot elsewhere, but he wanted to be the main guy in Mexico. He was described as like the Mexican Hulk Hogan and things like that.
That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely huge star. And then, there's this guy that is starting to get quite a lot of attention. There's a big chat about how the ladies were big fans of Vampiro as he's coming through, and almost like he potentially didn't expect that when he was developing the look and things like that. That seemed to come as a bit of a surprise to him. But then they are kind of two guys that end up at the top of the card going up against each other. And again, you talk about, is it real? Is it there to, serve a purpose? And then, it's sort of pointed like they have real heat, but then they work together by the sounds of it again and again and again and over various decades.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So if we could talk about the backstage, let's refer to it as like sort of beyond the mat type stuff that we get from AAA. I found that interesting. Maybe not the most interesting thing. I think his relationship with his daughter is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And like the sort of personal part of it, but I like the backstage stuff for AAA. We had a scene where Jeff Jarrett was clearly wrestling for AAA, and he was definitely drunk, right?
Oh yeah, definitely under the influence of something, and you can kind of tell right from the start, like because he appears and he's walking over to like the monitors where Vampiro and a couple others are, and just the way he's interacting with them is odd. Right from the off.
It's sort of playful, but right in their face. It's like bordering on aggressive and confrontational.
And yeah, I was immediately thinking, okay, so because I listen to Jeff Jarrett's podcast quite a lot, and he is very open about him having a lot of issues through various points in time, and you're thinking, okay, this is one, we can see it, we can see he's having a problem here. And he's one of the talking heads, and he's talking on the podcast. Although I don't think necessarily referencing that moment that's being shown. He's more talking in general terms about Vampiro.
And Vampiro seems to indicate that he doesn't have a very good. He says something like, "I've been battling with you my whole life," or something like that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It sounds like he feels that Jarrett screwed him in WCW and felt it wasn't a recognisable name and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Jarrett appears to start a fight backstage. Yeah. He looks like he's trying to tell Karrion Kross to come get him, and Kross looks like he could snap him in two.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of people that obviously don't want this to become a thing. And Vampiro is running the show, and he obviously doesn't want any distractions that are taken away from what the show is supposed to be. And he is basically like trying to banish Jarrett from the arena, just get rid of him, get him out. And then I think by the end, once he's gone, Karrion Kross is almost kind of laughing about it, like, but it must be weird because you've got this. He was a big star. Jeff Jarrett was a big star, and he's obviously quite a get, I think, for a show in Mexico, because he'll come in, he's got name value, and it sounded like from the stuff I've heard him say, like he has done a lot of tours in Mexico, so he will have established himself there, I think, at various points in time, but he is not fit to be working with anyone. I kept thinking, do you think he's been in the ring for a match? Because it kind of seemed like he maybe had, and I'm thinking, should he have been? Didn't seem like he should have been.
I think, from what I gathered, he was due to be, and he was coming out and throwing nachos into the crowd.
Yeah, there was that.
I think they just said, "Nah, fuck this, let's just get him," and that's maybe how that all kicked off.
Yeah.
There was another part where one of the female wrestlers, Sexy Star, who wrestles in Lucha Underground as well, she was going into business for herself.
Yeah.
She tried to pop someone's arm, I think.
Yeah. I'd remembered hearing about this, but I didn't know when it had happened and where it had happened and all that. So that was interesting for me, because I remember it being like, I've always been one for, even when I was out of wrestling, not interested, I would go on, some of the websites and just check, what's going on where and stuff like that. And I remember it being quite a big headline, and
oh really?
You absolutely cannot do this. This is this is like one of the ultimate no-nos in wrestling. You can't go in there and deliberately try to hurt your opponent. That's not cool. So I remembered the story, but I had no idea it had happened there.
It's quite interesting. It feels like that. Was it? It was Triple Mania. I think it was like their 25th or their 20th anniversary of Triple Mania or something like that. It feels like it could have done with its own documentary based on the way things were going. And I think, like I said, John Morrison. Yeah. I think it was maybe called Johnny Mundo at that point in AAA. I liked when he was speaking on the mic, and Vampiro was like, "Oh, great Mexican kid" or something like that, talking through the thing. And you could like all this thing about I fucking hate wrestling. Like, he does not hate wrestling.
I think he maybe wants to hate it, but he can't. Like it's basically, I think it's at the start, and then it's sort of picked up again at the end, where he is obviously like trying to get John Morrison to say some specific words to basically call him out, and then it's like he's getting so frustrated because I think the microphone isn't working that he's been handed and things like that. Yeah, and he's worried it's taken too long for him to call him out for the moment they're at in the show, and he's so invested in it. So yeah, is I hate it. Obviously, it's a job for him, but that's not a guy that's just there to do his job and then go home. That's a guy that's invested in it.
Absolutely, and you saw him in the, he looked like he was in a media call. I think before it and all that, like, yes, he took his daughter's call during it, but I also think he gets across his daughter comes before everything.
Yeah,
basically. But I definitely don't. I'm not buying the I hate wrestling.
Nah.
Okay. There's some stuff that was really quite harrowing to hear. Now, before we talk about this, I've since done a bit of reading about Vampiro. People say that basically everything that comes out of his mouth is a lot of nonsense. So, but he's in the doctor's surgery, in the doctor's appointment. The doctor's saying him, how many concussions you had now? 24. He talks about being 86% of his body having arthritis.
Yeah.
And basically that a lot of this sort of grumpiness seems to come from pain. It seems like, he's talking about being full of painkillers and medicine. And it was starting to wear off, and I think he said something like, I just want to sit in the dark or play computer games or something like that.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I was thinking when I was hearing about this, because I'm trying to remember when I watched it, if you'd already messaged me saying, he's kind of known to maybe make things up when he's speaking. So I'm watching, I'm thinking, right, I maybe have to try and judge for myself here what's real and what's not. But if they've got a doctor saying some of these things, I think you're thinking, yeah, this sounds pretty real. We saw the clip where he hits the mat from Mike Awesome from is it like a suplex off the top or something like that?
Powerbomb, I think it was.
Yeah, powerbomb off the top. And the way his head bounces, it's fully believable he broke his neck in that
100%.
moment. Yeah. That was the one where he was supposed to be through a table, wasn't it? But they couldn't find a table, so they just did it.
I think they landed on... Did they not land on like a... Was the table not down?
Was it?
They landed really awkwardly.
So yeah, I was taking some things with a pinch of salt, but obviously the guy's had injuries. That was pretty evident. When he first started talking, there's a moment where he's talking about his like pre-wrestling life, and you mentioned him on tour with Milli Vanilli, and he seemed to start talking about going and like holding up pimps for money, and I was like, is this going to be real? And then there seemed to be some bodyguard for Milli Vanilli that was there saying, yeah, that's what we were doing. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, was he talking about working for like the Montreal Mafia?
It sounded like it, yeah.
Sounds like a TNA faction. Yeah, that was... It was so scatterbrained, this. I expected... I don't know if it really had a negative impact on the viewing of it. I don't... I could just do a bit more... I think I could have done a bit more focus on one thing.
I think we're kind of used to the way a story's told in a documentary, and this seemed to be totally different. Because it kind of it starts very near the end, and then it loops you back round to basically the same point. But then they're talking. There's bits where I was thinking, Jesus, this guy's had a rough life. Like he's definitely talking about being sexually abused by a priest at a point, and there was a lot of things. Again, you're thinking. I was actually watching and hearing some of them thinking, I kind of hope that's not true. And, he's made that up. But, I didn't get the vibe with some of that stuff that it was being made up.
Yeah. Getting towards the end of it, I genuinely enjoyed the background stuff to Lucha Underground that they showed. And they had like a lovely what seemed like a lovely relationship with Matt Striker. Was he called Matt Striker in WWE?
I think he was, yeah.
Yeah. I quite enjoyed all that sort of stuff they talked about. They just gave us a bit of background about Lucha Underground, Robert Rodriguez being involved, things like that. It seems like he was splitting his time between like flying Mexico, LA, and it seems like he'd settled in to like quite a good family life, moving his daughter to sort of quiet area.
Mm-hmm.
The things about him opening up a Krav Maga, is it Krav Maga? Is that what it's called?
Krav Maga, yeah.
Krav Maga school, and had he started something called the Guardian Angels, or did he take it from somewhere else?
Yeah, it sounded like the Guardian Angels existed in a city where he spent a lot of time, and he had then basically got an agreement to launch it in whatever city he was living in at the time. So he's like expanded it to that area by the sounds of it, and that all sounded real. I think they had the guy, like I think it said head of the Guardian Angels, that was on as a talking head talking about that as well,
which is just all such an interesting dynamic of this person that says he hates people.
I hate people. Yeah,
I want to be away from people. I just want to sit in the dark and play a computer. I hate wrestling, even though that's what I'm flying everywhere here and there for it. And I've started this school that's great for people, great for people's mental health and all that sort of stuff. And also doing this Guardian Angels thing, which is like a neighborhood watch patrol type.
I've got it written. Mexico City is where he launched it.
Right,
so
right.
I think it maybe existed in Canada, wherever he'd lived in Canada. There's a few things that caught my ear. You know, the Conan thread is kind of there all the way through, but he seems extremely paranoid about Conan because he's talking about Conan going to WCW 2 years before him, and he's convinced that by the time he got there, Conan had already formed everyone else's opinion of what Vampiro was going to be.
He says he's made his life hell.
Yeah.
Due to his connections, he's talking about Hall, Nash, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he ended up getting some matches with like Hogan and Flair and stuff like that, and it sounded like Bischoff was maybe, or would it have been Vince Russo? One of them, whoever was leading the brand at the time, got interested in him when he like had a band, like a punk rock band, show up and
Misfits.
The Misfits, and I think maybe do his entrance or something like that, and he was blending in with the band, which you can see from that era of WCW. They'd have more interest in that than somebody maybe being able to work a match really well. So getting himself noticed that way. And Jarrett seemed pretty adamant that he felt Vampiro's character was too close to the Sting Crow character. Now, I think they're pretty different. Like, I kind of thought that Sting Crow was pretty original at the time. You know, I say original, it's ripped off directly from a film, but in wrestling terms, I didn't think there was anything really like that, but maybe the indication from that was he maybe needed more layers. Vampiro is like his own thing to really stand out in a WCW type environment.
Mm-hmm. I think Jarrett says there the fans didn't know Vampiro enough, and I've got my notes here. I think his look was enough to intrigue most fans, especially in that era. I remember us watching that Halloween Havoc 2000 and just going like, I think his look was enough. It just
his look definitely drew people in. I wonder if you see him week on week.
Aye.
Do you need more? Do you need a bit more depth? But, again, in the WCW environment, who knows whether what they would want him to be or become. Maybe they were just like, he is just a guy that's at this level. He's never going to become one of the big superstars. But he did have a good look. It stood out. Yeah,
definitely. Was it on this, or was it on? I've watched that much different stuff recently, with like the death. Was it the death of who killed WCW? That thing. Was it on this that they talked about Sting? Was it on this that they talked about Sting burying him? No,
I don't think so. I've not noted it anyway.
I was watching something, and Vampiro, I think it was maybe an interview he did with somebody. Basically, he said Sting buried him. Sting hated him because he looked too much like him. He was worried about me taking his spot and all this. I think it was Nash talking about it, and Nash was like, out of anybody I've ever met in the wrestling business, Sting's probably the only person that I've ever known that's never sort of been political or anything like that. And I think Vampiro thought that Sting had it out for him, and and buried him. But
Sounds like a wee bit of a paranoid guy, I think. Yeah.
Honestly, I think like between the punk music and this attitude, he totally reminds me of CM Punk. I thought this was quite funny, Karrion Kross popping up on this every now and again. He's obviously done a lot of work in Mexico, but it looks at things, eh?
Yeah.
It's interesting because he seems like I think they were trying to portray him as being a sort of closer person to Vampiro. And he says he kind of gets him, but he understands that people don't really like him, and he comes across like having a bad attitude. But I think he's trying to say because he's so enthusiastic.
Yeah.
He's almost sort of burying him a little bit.
Yeah. It was how you touched on earlier, the sort of the running thread between him and the daughter. He's obviously trying to like reconnect with his daughter.
Yes.
And I think the story comes out that he feels like he's made sacrifices for the family because he turned down a big money offer for Japan because he just felt like he couldn't be that far away from the family the whole time. But then the wife left him anyway. And it kind of, I assumed from the way the story was going that the daughter went with the wife initially, and then because she's talking, I think, at a point in time where it's really hard where she's gone back to live with him, but she's a teenager now, and that is not, the sort of forming a bond time that you would naturally start at. And
he's living in this house with like coffin-shaped cupboards and stuff.
Yeah,
which is really the stuff that I did like. I liked the old footage they had of him like with his daughter when she was little, and he was at like our gymnastics recital type thing, and he's saying like, "This is my favourite place in the world. This is my favourite thing to do." And it started to give you a bit more of a 3-dimensional look at him.
Yeah,
I thought the younger version of him, where he was like still built and still like young and good looking, to see him with his daughter the same way as what he seemed to be with her when they got older, I found that like endearing and interesting as well.
Yeah, so that where they're like, when he's younger, they're in a park and people are coming up and asking for stuff, and he's doing it, I think, but being like,
he's just like, I fucking hate people and all that, like looking at the camera and saying
it is a thing like. Well, I've never been famous. It's very hard to put yourself in that shoes. I don't even have a kid.
What do you mean?
But
Outlaw Nation would definitely
true.
Say
but imagine if you were, somewhere with your young child. I imagine that would grate on you if people were coming up. Yeah, like there's something seems a bit wrong about that. Like if you're on your own, I get it, but if you're with a young child, I don't know.
It's that Andre thing, and clearly Vampiro and Andre are in different stratospheres, but. That Andre thing I'm saying, I just wish I could be you for a day, sort of thing. What was the thing I was going to mention there about Vampiro and his daughter? Yeah, like, who am I to judge this guy on like 30-second clip of him and his daughter? But he was talking to his daughter, that they were sat in a diner. He seemed to unhealthily share with his daughter, I felt. He was talking about like, I fucking hate being Vampiro and all this. I just thought that's weird chat to be having with your daughter.
Yeah, and I think I can see him saying it to a camera. Say it to the camera how you feel about all this, but again, I'm not sure I ever believed a word when he was saying that, because again, it sort of ties in with the I hate wrestling thing. We flash back again to a point not long after that where he's still, running shows from backstage. But I'm trying. Is it Karrion Kross that gives him the suplex in the ring?
Yeah.
When he clearly didn't want to do it, and he's sort of said to him, you've had all these injuries, blah blah blah.
Kross didn't want to do it.
Yeah. But Vampiro feels the need to be in the ring and taking that bump. He's got a very strange relationship with wrestling.
I think you might be able to tell me if I'm wrong. I think he told the doctor that he did it because he wanted to get hurt on purpose.
I think that's I think that's right.
And the doctor says, "Look, you're a couple of concussions away from dementia." Yeah,
because that hurt him. Like, he couldn't move, because I think Karrion Kross is saying he stood over him, basically making it look like he's pointing and shouting at him, but what he's saying is, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "I can't move." Yeah, great. Yeah.
And it all finishes off at his daughter's college or high school graduation. I wasn't quite sure. I don't know how that works. I didn't think they ever put an age on his daughter.
I was thinking it was school, because I thought she was young, but like, could have been college. Yeah.
And it just sort of finished on a really sad tone, because it looked like I came away from it thinking like his daughter's getting to the age where she's just going to leave now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't really know what he's going to do, because he is portraying himself as doing all of this for his daughter. And
yeah.
I don't think that's what he is doing it for. But
No, I think, you know how you always hear that you get examples like Ric Flair, perfect example. They can't walk away. They kind of, it's like a drug, and they can't go without it. They can't go without the crowd reaction and all that kind of thing. I kind of think he has that thing in him, but he's so determined to prove he doesn't, that everything he says goes against that.
Yeah.
But everything he does makes you realise, he can't. He references a few times how he loves like doing the shows from behind the camera. I think in that diner moment where he's talking to his daughter, he's talking about, "I don't want to be out there in front of the crowd. I want to create from back here."
Mm-hmm.
But he keeps putting himself out in front of the crowd.
Yeah. That was a weird bit where he was like, he was on commentary, but he's going, "Play my fucking music," and all that. That was really weird. Anyway, we get the credits, and as it's fading to black, it tells us that he was diagnosed with early onset of Alzheimer's, and then that he returned to the ring to fight with Conan at the following Triple Mania.
Yeah.
It knows what it's doing by telling you those things one after the other.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that's not real about the Alzheimer's. I suspect it isn't. Like, is any promotion going to allow you to do that if you're...
I don't know, if it's involved.
Yeah, maybe.
I could have swore Conan either owned or ran Triple A. But maybe he does.
Yeah, because it is, I think as they're coming towards that ending, it is like I don't think they say it as such, but it's like a battle for the company. That's kind of the way it comes across. He's basically saying, if I beat you, you have to leave. You can never show your face here again.
Okay.
There was a phrase he said that I quite liked. Wrestling has a great entrance plan, but a shitty exit strategy. I quite like that. It probably applied to a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
Just never known when to quit, never been able to quit at the right time.
I talk about Lucha Underground a lot, but he's a really, him and Striker have this great relationship as the commentary team for Lucha Underground. I don't think I've watched it far enough that I knew that he ended up getting in the ring. I was quite shocked to see that. He seemed to be dressed as like a priest or something crazy. Yeah. But yeah, maybe further down the line, something we'll look at. So that was Vampiro. The Fall and Rise of Vampiro. I don't think I would I recommend it? I don't think I would.
Nah, me neither. I think, like you said at the start, what I think I wanted, because I knew so little about him, was like a biography. Here's your wrestling biography. And it wasn't that. And it was jumping about so much. Like, I'm not saying you couldn't follow it. You could follow it. But I think I'm a basic guy. I look for a beginning, a middle, and an end to a story.
I think not knowing very much about Vampiro, and then having seen that match that we've seen, you just think there must be some crazy story behind this guy that's called Vampiro. I mean, being called Vampiro is enough. He looked crazy. and he does look like he's got an interesting story, but this documentary doesn't tell you that story. I have put a link to it on YouTube in the show notes if anyone who's listening so chooses, having heard everything that we've just said about it. If you fancy it, then it's there.
Fair enough. Okay.
So our next one, go for it.
Right. Okay. So the next one was You Cannot Kill David Arquette. I will read a brief synopsis. Actor David Arquette attempts a rocky return to the sport that stalled his promising Hollywood career. Now, I had seen this before. I saw this a couple of years ago. I think it was during the lockdowns, maybe about 4 years ago. And I was very happy to watch it again because I remember enjoying it and thinking in a few moments, wow. I'll kind of take the lead on where we start here, which is a clip showing like the animosity of trained wrestlers towards Arquette for him winning the WCW title, all as part of a promotion for the Ready to Rumble film. And you get a few sort of recognisable wrestlers you'll see. I try and remember which nasty boy it was that's
Ryan
quite
Knobs.
prominent early on. All through this film, I really there's moments of concern for David Arquette. There's moments of I kind of want to try and help him. So we know David Arquette as an actor. I think maybe the highest profile, maybe the Scream films as Deputy Dewey.
Not Ready to Rumble.
No, well, you know. And as we're going through, there's the overarching story is that this is a guy who is legitimately and always has been a wrestling fan, loves wrestling. He loved Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth, maybe a wee bit too much, but we'll cover that as we go. And it's a guy who then got an opportunity, and I think is Bischoff's the talking head in this? I think, yeah. And he is, I'm involved in the decision to go that way. He's there at the time. I think it's when Bischoff and Russo are both there. And he's like, I think Bischoff is taking some accountability here. I thought it was, good idea. Russo is the one who's really running with it as it did what I wanted it to do. He's, in news stories, he's on magazines, it's out there as a story. So it's one of those where Russo is very happy to take the blame for this because he claims it is what he wanted it to do. And you get this whole fans online, there's pictures of comments coming up and things like that. Worst thing that ever happened in wrestling. He won the belt. What the hell? All that kind of thing. And I think a lot of fans do consider it one of the moments that led to WCW dying. It's one of those things that the fans did not want, and they really dig into that. They're talking it's a belt. Ric Flair's one, Dusty Rhodes is one, Hulk Hogan's one. And now it's on an actor. It's on David Arquette.
And a sort of scrawny little guy he was at the point as well.
Yeah, he really was. So this is intended to be a redemption story for David Arquette. He feels like this whole thing, not only, the way the wrestling community responded to him, but he actually feels like this impacted his Hollywood run. He was considered a very promising, talented young actor. He got into the wrestling business. He won the title. Loads of people in that side of the world hated him. And maybe Hollywood didn't take him seriously after that.
Yeah. You feel really sorry for him, don't you?
Yeah. And he's sitting in a chair saying he wants respect. He wants people to respect him. He feels like the way to do this is to go back to wrestling and actually kind of go through, at least, in a very quick cycle, what guys go through when they are trying to make it big in the business. his wife and kids start to get quite prominent on the documentary. I think she may be involved in the production. She may be executive producer or something like that.
Yeah.
So he's got what looks like a pretty good life. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got his young family. He's living in a nice house. Just don't do this, David. But anyway, he's adamant that this is what he needs to do. His wife says she's never seen the Scream films. I'm not buying it.
It's outrageous.
Yeah. And he feels like, after the Scream films, he was typecast as a goof, and you can see that, that's totally believable. He talks about auditioning for roles for 10 years and not getting anything. I was like, wow. I've never actually checked his filmography to see if he had a 10-year gap of not getting any roles. He's appeared in, well, up till a point, he appeared in all the Scream films. But yeah, maybe exaggerating, but a lot of auditions, and he's not getting any work. He's had some issues. He's had some, substance issues, alcohol issues, things like that. That's touched on. We get to see, I think, is it Courtney Cox? Is she the wife of one of the kids? I think the mother, sorry, of one of the kids.
Yes, his oldest. Yeah.
And, she's, I think, a talking head talking about how weird it is. She found out that he got into wrestling. Apparently, they used to go to shows together and he'd get really into it and she'd, just kind of be there, I think, thinking the whole thing's a bit silly. You get more talking heads like he came from an acting family. His sister, Patricia, is that right?
Yeah.
Patricia,
Roseanne as well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Definite, it's in the family. They've had a level of success in acting. So yeah, we kind of settle in to where the story's going to go. I found some of the talking heads really interesting because you've got he kind of knows what's happened. It's a lot of people see it as exposing the business. He went in there as an actor, a pretty scrawny actor. He won their belt. He won their big title.
And
I think
he throws his hands up and said, and there's little bits and pieces with DDP, and he said that Dallas came back and said to him to put the belt in, and he said no. And DDP even says that he said no.
Yeah.
But is it Bischoff that says, what would you have done in his shoes, or is it DDP says?
It's DDP, who I thought was bringing a level of sense to all of this. He's
absolutely.
The guy's a wrestling fan. Now, he said he doesn't want to do it, but they're putting some pressure on, saying, right, this would be great from, basically an advertising point of view. Use it for the film. And it feels like this has happened to him rather than him, saying, me, pick me, 100%. I'll do this. Yeah.
And he's got this sort of childlike, he's got a lot of childlike personality points, but he's got this sort of childlike enthusiasm for wrestling, which as a viewer you can totally relate to, but he's also got this sort of childlike innocence to him as well, where looking at him as, I think, what he maybe says he's like 46, 48-year-old man, you kind of want to go come on, mate.
Yeah.
A little bit.
We could still make it, right?
Yes. Oh, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, are we both still on medication for backs?
Trying to get off it, man. Come on.
Okay. So yeah, he talks about how he wants to honor wrestling and clear his name, and you get the feeling this is all coming from a really genuine place. There's nothing false about it. He really wants to do this. He believes this is something he has to do. So he wants to make an appearance at this Legends of Wrestling event, and he's going to speak to Brian Knobbs, and when he's having a conversation, there's a physical altercation develops, and I think that this is a good way of just outlining just how much resentment there is in the wrestling community about what's happened. But maybe we'll circle back to this Legends of Wrestling event as we go. There's so many times he's going to a doctor, right? And they're actually running through a lot of the things that are going on with him. He's on blood thinners, and if he starts bleeding, there's a big health risk for him. He's referencing this all while he's talked about, wrestlers destroying their bodies for decades and things like that. He knows that. He's done a fair bit of damage to his body himself. I think did they mention a heart attack? Has he had a heart attack?
Yeah.
And he's described as being at this point in time a functioning alcoholic. He drinks heavily, but he kind of gets through his life as he's doing that.
And when they're talking about that, this is sort of intercut between him vomiting in the toilet and drinking, and it's all pretty candid. It's all pretty candid, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think you mentioned to me one of the scenes you found most harrowing in this is him going to a neurologist, and they're looking at his brain, and I think there's evidence that there's some damage there. But they give him ketamine, and that scene is not an easy watch.
It's horrible. I can't quite put my finger on why it's so horrible, but I think it's because it's supposed to chill him out, and he starts getting a little bit confrontational, but he's he's clearly away with it. And there's things coming to the surface that are obviously, like a lot of his personality is a lot of projection around, I don't know, he's, again, that sort of childlike behaviour is coming from somewhere, and he's clearly got a lot of issues, I think.
I think the neurologist mentions that, while it's not like he's got brain damage or anything like that, his brain isn't connected in the way that the majority of people's brains are connected. And I think that was a way of explaining, it's just different. He's different. You get some sort of like family backstory about, I think there's like a lot of life as youngsters spent in a commune, and talk about maybe the mother being abusive to the girls and things like that. There's not an awful lot in there, and I think it's positioned as, I don't think he necessarily suffered any abuse. I think it's more what he saw and what he experienced, leaving a bit of a scar on him.
A different upbringing to your usual.
Yeah.
Not much structure, it seemed.
Yeah. And I think it's maybe just after that he's getting a call from a promotion inviting him to an event. He doesn't feel physically ready to wrestle and things like that, but he's going and getting pictures done and stuff like that so he can do a signing desk at a convention, which ends pretty sadly. There's hardly anyone going up to his table. There's actually people at the convention talking about they hate him. In his mind, he ruined wrestling.
Very reminiscent of The Wrestler, I thought.
Yeah. There's funny moments in it. Again, we've talked about the way his mind works, but he's talking about like he wants to be taken seriously. He doesn't want to be seen as a joke, and then the next thing is like this wizard costume thing that he's got on the go. It's like, okay, David. That's
like where does this magician / wizard character come from?
Yeah,
that's not what he was like in WCW.
Yeah,
it's so weird.
There's so many moments in this, but I felt bad for him because all his intentions are good. There's nothing sinister. There's nothing even, he's not doing this to make money. He wants to prove himself in this world.
He wants to give back, doesn't he? Or he wants to try and pay the dues that people feel that. Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure at a clip at one of the conventions, there's a picture of New Jack holding a knife to David Arquette's throat.
Yes.
And I'm seeing that and thinking, how is nobody concerned that he's actually going to cut him?
It sort of just flashed past really quickly, and I was like, oh, that's concerning.
We move on to some backyard wrestling. So he's being invited to an event. He's going to go to this literal backyard wrestling. There's very few people there. He has picked the wrong audience for his magician gimmick or wizard gimmick or whatever it was supposed to be. And he, like, the guys that are there, like, I think at the start they're all talking, well, I'm going to kick his ass. This isn't, we don't play here. This is real for us.
Yeah.
At the end, I thought one of them was speaking a wee bit better, where he was like, I hope he does go and learn this and prove himself and all that, but you don't just walk in here and do this. And one of them says something about, well, he learned a wrestling lesson because, he turned up, there's nobody here and he didn't get paid.
That was funny.
Yeah.
That was the only part I felt the documentary that felt a little contrived. He didn't really think he was going to an event and going to be in the ring and all that.
Yeah. He does take a beating.
He does. He does.
But I wasn't sure who it was. There's like a guy driving him about and speaking to him and things like that. I kind of felt like I recognised, but maybe just from another documentary or something like that. Who tells him, if you really want to do this, you got to go and get trained.
He felt like the kind of guy that would end up on like a Lou Theroux documentary, didn't he?
Yeah. He goes to wrestling school, and to be fair, he's working. He's doing his best. There's blood, sweat, and tears. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. And he, you can see he's serious about this. He wants to do this again. God, poor guy. And I think from there is that where he goes see DDP.
Yeah.
And
he's call back to the stuff that we watched last episode with Jake and Scott Hall.
Yeah. He's basically gone cap in hand and said, I need your help. And I think, they'd obviously had a bit of a dynamic in the WCW days. I imagine DDP just seems like a good guy. So, good guy to go and ask for help. And DDP says he is going to help him. And I'm thinking this is all fine because we just see what looked like some yoga stretches on the go. And this is all good and it's all going to be okay. But we're going to Mexico.
That's right, that's where it goes. I couldn't remember where it went next, that's where it goes next.
Yeah.
Which was a great step in his sort of in his redemption story, I thought. Mm-hmm. Because it starts out like, if this guy can't do a Hurricane Rana, then get him out the gym is essentially what that guy says.
Yeah.
To him, like, being part of the show and some of the fans being, if the gringo turns up, I want to be here next time and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. It was a really nice moment because he got a positive reaction from the crowd. I think, he's protected to some extent. It's a tag match. He's going to go in and do his bit. But I think there's maybe a surprise positive reaction when he starts doing his stuff because everyone's like, oh, he has actually gone and learned this, which is, that's nice. That was positive. Tell you what I wasn't so positive about. Mexican street wrestling.
Easy.
I want no part of any of that ever. Like, they're just on concrete and they're jumping about and doing stuff as the lights are stopping the traffic. They're performing in front of and around the cars. And again, though, it's a bit positive. He's going down the cars and people are giving him some money and stuff like that.
Eventually.
Yeah. I think reluctance at the start, but he takes a leap off something onto someone. I was like, a part of me was like, good for you, David. And part of me was like, just
heart attack.
Don't hurt yourself. The Mexico was a great step, and then things seem to be going positive, and he has to go and see the doctor. I think the doctor asked him if he'd been in a car accident when he and he's like, no, I've been wrestling. I'm a wrestler. So he's got several cracked ribs, and if they break, the risk is he could puncture a lung. After the next thing I've got in my notes is there is a brilliant reaction by his wife when she discovers that he has bought a wrestling ring and it's in their garden.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not what she expected to come home to that day.
It seems like she lives in quite an interesting bubble.
Mm-hmm.
It's with the gigantic furniture that's twice the size and stuff like that. I feel like she probably walks into different things like that every week.
Yeah. I think we moved from there to, there's a guy called, is it RJ City? That's what I've got, yeah. So I think there's an angle set up, basically on TMZ report. They've done something, they've had an interaction, all to set up an angle. And it seems like he performs pretty well in this match with RG City. I think, he takes the loss, but it looked like they were decent cooperation, decent chemistry from the clips they showed in the match, which seemed like a
I
positive.
really liked the way that they shot that, where they were splicing shots of the match and shots of them talking
Talking about what
their spots backstage or outside before it. I loved the way that was shot. It was great.
Yep. Yeah, and it sounded like he found a pretty good dance partner there. It was good cooperation going on in the match. I don't think there was any. I kept thinking somebody's just going to bury him, somebody's just going to expose him, but it certainly did not seem to be the case in this match. All seemed to be very positive.
He works for AEW, RJ City.
All right. Okay.
On the wrestling capacity, he does like a lot of media stuff for them.
Okay. I was happy with him because I felt like he was in there to help him out. It felt that way.
Definitely.
He seems to have won his daughter over. His daughter, who was saying, "No, don't." There's a point I think early on where he's like, "Do you think Daddy should wrestle?" And I think his daughter, who's I think the oldest of the kids, like, "No, this is ridiculous." Whereas his wee boy's like, "Yeah, yeah, let's do this." But the daughter seems quite proud. The way he's doing this, I can't remember if it's his wife, but talking about him, he's lost weight, he's quit smoking, he's quit drinking, and all that. And I've got in my notes because the way these things go, that everything feels like it's going a little too well right now. You're just waiting for the moment. We see him. There's clips of him with, like, I think Bubba Ray Dudley, Jerry Lawler. He seems to be, having some indie matches with some established names involved, which is nice.
Yeah, he obviously bounced around for quite a fair bit during this period. I remember there was a lot of talk about him being in the Royal Rumble.
All right, okay.
I wonder what year that would have been. Maybe 2020 Rumble. A lot of people thought he was going to be in the Rumble because he had done a lot of work on independence and stuff like that, and he'd been getting people had been saying how well he'd been doing and all that sort of stuff. I think that was before the Nick Gage stuff. Okay,
yeah. So where we're going next? It's Nick Gage, right? Nick Gage, deathmatch guy. We all know this, right? It did seem like maybe David Arquette didn't fully know what a deathmatch was going to be, but he's, he maybe thinks, well, you trust your opponent. You trust the guy on the other side of the ring from you. This was the moment in the documentary, when I'd watched it in lockdown. My wife watched this with me. She knew who David Arquette was. She didn't know
she knew who Nick Gage was.
No. She didn't know that he'd ever been WCW champion, but she knew who he was, and she was quite into this documentary when we were watching it, even though she hasn't got the slightest interest in wrestling. This was the moment where she was like, no, this can't happen. You can't tell me this just happens. Like, well, it's not really supposed to. This, these matches, we know they're brutal, we know there's weapons, we know there's dangerous stuff going on in the ring. So he's having a death match with Nick Gage. Now, Nick Gage is...
What about when he's coming out to the GC... I assume it's GCW this was in.
Yeah.
But we get a really good perspective of the camera from behind him, and he's walking down these steps towards the arena, and he does like his daft magician thing, where he like shoots webs across the crowd, and it's just like, I don't know, that could like really, really work if it was done in a obnoxious heel type of way. Yeah. But know that's not what he's playing.
No, like this is John Cena at ECW One Night Stand throwing his t-shirt and getting it thrown back at him. This is that on steroids. This is that, turned up to 11. This is not his audience. They all bloody love Nick Gage. This is his audience.
Yep.
And I don't know if this is him. I've not seen that many Nick Gage death matches. Obviously, I know people get cut. I know that happens. There's these. They seem very popular. These light things that smash over people. But he's taken some liberties here, Nick Gage.
To be fair, before he does, it seems like it's going all right.
Yeah, like they start off. It's going well. It's almost like he's Nick Gage is cooperating with him early. He's letting him get some
100%.
moves and
Definitely.
offense, and then he is looking shocked at the fact that Arquette was able to do these things. He's selling that. Now, I don't know whether Nick Gage gets carried away. I don't know.
I genuinely think it was an accident. I genuinely think that Arquette's wasn't used to being involved with the light tube thing. I think he's probably moved in a way that has resulted in him cutting his neck.
So, yeah, for anyone that's not seen this moment, there's a smashed light tube. So Nick Gage has basically like a chunk of it, and he's holding it up towards Arquette, and then it gets pushed into him into the neck area, and there is, I think, immediate concern, certainly on Arquette's part, certainly on the guy that's there with Arquette, who I think is like one of his closest friends. He's like ringside. I think he was sent basically to tour with Arquette by his wife.
His wife basically said, "Look, I'll feel all right if you're going."
Yeah. So that guy, you see his face as well, and Arquette is clutching his neck in a really disturbing way, and the blood is flowing, and it looks like he's just going to leave.
Well, to start with, he fights Gage off, and to Gage's credit, he clearly realises that something's wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, it looks like he's going to leave. He gets out the ring, throws him off him, sort of thing, and gets out the ring.
And then Arquette goes back in the ring, which I'm shaking my head. Even I know this happens. I've seen this before, but I'm still shaking my head when he goes back in the ring, because there's something in his head telling him he has to finish the match, because he wants to be serious. He wants to be taken seriously in this business. So he goes back in. Credit to him, or idiot, whatever way you want to look at it. He takes the pin. There's probably some idiots online moaning about the fact he just stood up and got straight out of the ring after it, after taking the pin, and didn't lay there selling it for 5 minutes while his neck's gushing with blood. And he is immediately going to be taken to the hospital. Who I think it's mentioned, is it Luke Perry in the car with him?
Jungle Boy's driving.
Yes.
Luke Perry's in the car with them.
So Arquette, close friends with Luke Perry at the time, and yeah, they take him to the hospital, and then I think it's from there you see, I think it's a clip of his wife saying, I'm genuinely worried he is not going to be here. Fast forward a year and he is not going to be alive, and I think maybe slight disbelief that he's going to keep going with this. He's not done with wrestling. I actually looked up at a point, like, what's Arquette's views on Nick Gage after this whole thing, and he's not like slamming him or anything like that. He's basically been like, I probably shouldn't have been in there. That's the reality of it. I took the booking, I took the match. I maybe should have watched more death matches or whatever. I was going into his environment and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, okay, fair play. Yeah, it would have been probably quite easy to slam him after the event. I think
they maybe talked about doing a rematch as well. I don't think they did it. Spoke about it on the documentary, but they definitely spoke about it.
Right. So I think if going in, certainly with the other wrestlers, if going in there and finishing that match after what happened doesn't get you some credit from them, I'm thinking nothing will. But we are going back to the Legends of Wrestling show, so we're, I assume, 12 months on in the cycle from what he's been doing and what he's been going through, and David Arquette has been invited to go and face Mr. Anderson, so that's Mr. Kennedy from WWE, and it's a big deal, and there's no underselling the fact this is a big deal. He was basically totally flat out rejected from being there a year before. Some people to the point of, I think, wanting to physically assault him for the very suggestion that he would be there. And now fast forward 12 months, he has done enough to be in a match at this event, which that's a big deal.
Short space of time to have done all.
So he is this before or after this? No, it's after this. So I'll continue. Mr. Anderson is full on selling. He is not a David Arquette fan.
I love these promos that he cuts before their match. Brilliant.
Yeah,
he's full on like raging redneck type character.
Yeah. Yeah, he's selling it really well to the point where I think he got me. I was like, is he just going to beat the shit out of him in this match? But no, he's not. It's going to be a fully cooperative match, and we get a nice moment where we've talked earlier about his obsession with Miss Elizabeth. His wife is at this point, or seemingly close to this, not sure if she wants any part of this. She doesn't want him to be doing any of this, but she is going to walk down to the ring with him, doing a little bit of cosplay Miss Elizabeth tribute, which he loves. I think Miss Elizabeth was his favourite woman on earth.
He's got a macho, he's got a Savage and Elizabeth tattoo on his arm.
Yeah, so nice moment for him. It's a big show. He has got a big opponent, and he must be feeling like he's got some respect back, and his wife is by his side walking down the ring. I couldn't actually tell if he won the match, but he certainly got his hand raised by Booker T after the match.
I think he lost it. Someone tells me he lost the match.
But we see pictures of the crowd standing and applauding, which, again, very nice moment. I kept thinking as I'm seeing these moments, he needed this, but also in the back of my mind, like being, can you just stop now? Because, I still have the concern about where this is going to lead.
Yeah. You've done what you set out to do, sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, they talk about he made I think is it Wrestling Illustrated
PWI
Top 500 for the year, which again seems incredible. It's getting your respect back is one thing, but I think that just shows people were impressed by what he was doing in the ring. Not just that he took it seriously, not just that he went and got some training and all that, but actually impressed by his performances. And that's backed up again by the crowd applause and crowd reactions and things like that. I'm imagining he wasn't, near the top of the list, but he was on the list. And
he was 453.
Hey, he's on the list, which is a hell of an achievement. So we've then moved past Luke Perry dying, which I think was that another moment of concern for his wife, because he was close to him and he started drinking again and things like that. But we get to a moment where he ends up, I think, having a match with Jungle Boy, who's Luke Perry's son.
Yeah, I guess it's like, did it seem like that was in a tribute to?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So nice moment there. And that's kind of the sort of fade to black, but there's some moments in the credits, and I am not sure I saw them the first time I watched this. I think when it ended, I was like, oh, we're done, and I kind of switched it off. However, seeing it this time, he's getting messages from the likes of Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, and that, whatever you may think of those individuals now, huge wrestling names, biggest wrestling names out there, and they are paying tribute to him for what he's done. And I think there was a bit at the end talking about him donating lots of money to the Pillman family, and I think Pillman's son was talking about that.
Yeah, Pillman Jr. said people could say what they wanted about him, but basically any money that he made off his WCW career donated to their family, which is just something you would never have heard otherwise.
So a good guy that I think got his respect back, did what he set out to do. I just hope he stops. Find another thing in your life that's less physically demanding.
Yeah, I think he has. I don't know for sure, but I think he has. I think as a wrestling fan, it's a really interesting documentary. I think you touched on that. A non-wrestling fan, I think it's a really interesting documentary as well. It's really well produced and done. It's a great story. You come away, how can you not feel endeared to David Arquette? Like I say, he's like a child. And there's the childlike aspect of being such a big wrestling fan, which you can totally relate to, but there is that naive thing that he's basically ended up in that situation with Nick Gage in the same scenario. So he's basically ended up with a WCW title on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was like I mentioned my wife watched it. She enjoyed it. She is not a wrestling fan. She has no interest in wrestling, but still, the documentary grabs you and it brings you into the story. And you've got your. It's like it's a wrestling match. The whole thing. He's the babyface. You root for him. You want him to succeed because he just comes across as a good, well-meaning guy, and you want him to achieve his goal at the end. And it felt like he did. So you had the payoff at the end. But it was really well done, really well told. It felt like there was a natural story arc to it, unlike the Vampiro one we talked about earlier. So very easy to watch. It didn't feel long watching it. I imagine it's a good hour and a half. It didn't feel long. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Enjoyed it just as much second time round.
Yeah, me too. I was the exact same as you. Had watched it and I remember coming away from thinking, my God, that's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
Second time around, I felt a little bit cynical about, like I said, that backyard wrestling show we went to because they were trying to play it up like, I'll just come in the ring and say a few words and all that sort of stuff. But apart from that, again, like you say, really, really good story arc and definitely massively recommend.
Yeah.
It wasn't one that was widely available or anything like that. I think I ended up seeing it through. What did we see it through? Was it through Sky?
Yeah.
Sky Store. Was it?
Yeah. So for a period of time, it was free on Sky. I think it was when I first watched it. So now this time, it was either Sky Store or Apple. It was some
one of them.
Thing.
Yeah, definitely. If you're looking for a wrestling documentary, this would be the one that I would definitely recommend. Funnily enough, both those ones we watched this week were an hour and a half, but the Arquette one certainly flew by. Versus the Vampiro one, we'd come away with, oh God,
yeah,
something uplifting.
I did them in back-to-back nights. I think I did Vampiro first, and yeah, it felt like a bit of a slog. But I'm glad I did it that way round because the next night it was very easy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. So a split bag, but both had their little bits and pieces. Excellent. How would you? I'll ask you at the end when we're finished documentaries. But if you had to rank the four that we've done so far, Arquette be the best? Would you say?
Yeah, I think Arquette would be Jake. The best, and Vampiro would be the worst. I'd probably have the Jake one just behind Arquette, and the Andre one next.
Arquette and Jake's felt quite maybe just the DDP thread, but they felt quite alike. Those for me are the best ones we've watched. So next time we're going to watch a couple. We're going to watch Wrestling Road Diaries, which seems to be set around Bryan Danielson, Colt Cabana, and another wrestler, can't remember who. This seems to be all set just before Danielson's going to go to WWE. And we'll watch Finn Balor, Fergal Devitt's Smack 'em Up, which is also set around just before him leaving New Japan and going to sign his WWE contract and starting NXT.
Nice.
So they should be interesting. Never seen either of those.
Me neither.
Smack 'em Up's a short one. Wrestling Road Diaries is a bit of a longer one, but it's supposed to be really good. And I think there's maybe two of them. But I could only ever find the first one. So we'll watch those and chat them through.
Cool.
Interesting to see Ring of Honor and indie behind the scenes type stuff, which I'm thinking we'll get.
Yeah, I've not really seen anything like that before, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Okie dokie. It's quite interesting not watching wrestling and talking about it.
Yeah.
So, two other things that I wanted to recommend. I said to you that I'd watched the Peacock-produced Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal documentary that they put out, and that was really, really good. Quite long, maybe 2.5 hours. Kind of follows Taylor Rotunda, Bo Dallas.
Right.
And it just comes across as his big brother being his hero sort of thing. but it's really interesting and really nicely done. And yeah, the first couple of episodes of Who Killed WCW, whilst potentially retreading old stuff that you've seen before, also quite worth a watch, I would say. Quite interesting.
Okay.
Apart
Yeah,
from
I wasn't
The Rock,
sure.
opinions on WCW.
I wasn't sure about it because, like, obviously, I felt like, is it just going to be, like you say, retreading? We've heard a lot of stuff before about what went wrong at WCW, and then I thought, is it just going to be a bunch of like talking heads all blaming each other? They're all just going to be like, man, it wasn't my fault, it was that guy.
Yeah, nah, it's not really like that. It's quite interesting. One of the guys that consistent talking head throughout it, what was his name? Guy Evans, the guy that wrote the Nitro book.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think I've said to you before, that book's brilliant, really, really good. I don't know if they're using his book as a sort of basis for the 4-part thing.
Okay.
I feel like he keeps it to a level of sort of independence.
Right.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I might give that a watch. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll talk Road Diaries and smack them up in 2 weeks' time.
Nice.
Yeah. Excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, can I tell you one last film?
Yeah.
That I've watched. You can tell me if you've watched any films. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
2?
Yeah. I don't know if it's called Winnie the Pooh 2, Blood and Honey, or Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Yeah, just like zero expectations, going in for a bit of daft fun. I quite enjoyed it. Genuinely quite enjoyed it.
Nice. I've not been watching many films, like, because I've been watching a lot of Euros, and I've also had that thing, the back issue where I'm reluctant, or I had been. It's a lot better now to sit for too long, and when I sit down to watch film, I want to watch the whole film like in one sitting. But the last film I did watch wasn't very good. I watched I think the first sequel to The Strangers. It's got Christina Hendricks.
Oh, I've never seen that. They Come at Night or something like that, is it called?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I wouldn't bother.
Okay. And I told you that I'd watched The Strangers Chapter 1.
Yeah.
And it's like literal retread of the first film. I assume because they thought, why did they never make sequels to The Strangers? It's like straight following on. Because I think you and I said that. I would like to have seen what happened to Liv Tyler.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you remake the first film again, does it?
No, that's an odd choice, especially when it was done so well.
Aye. And this is just like a poorer version of that.
That's disappointing.
It's got Speedman back. That's what they should have done. No, well, that would never worked actually, because, Or the guy from It's Always Sunny. Because his head blown off. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, we shall speak in 2 weeks' time, buddy.
Cool.
Take
Cheers.
it easy.